I'll never forget that morning. The sun had barely climbed over the rooftops when a harsh metallic roar split the quiet. At first I thought it was some construction crew down the street, but the sound was coming from my backyard. I threw on my slippers, bolted outside, and there she was. Melanie Payne, the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA, standing smugly beside a buzzing chainsaw as two men hacked into my century-old oak. That oak wasn't just a tree. It was the heart of my yard, older than the neighborhood itself, with roots deeper than Melanie's entire reign of terror. I shouted, demanded she stop. But Melanie just smirked, lifted her clipboard, and declared, HOA Bylaw 47.8 Unsafe vegetation must be removed. Never mind the fact that no such bylaw even exists. That's when I realized this wasn't about safety. It was about power, and Melanie had just declared war on the wrong man. Before we dive into the full story, let me ask, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments below. The oak wasn't something you just glanced at on your way to the trash bins. It was the kind of tree that slowed you down, made you look up and remember you're smaller than time. My grandfather planted it when this land was a mishmash of pastures and gravel lanes, long before the HOA arrived with its laminated rules and weaponized clipboards. As a kid, I measured summers in rings of shade under those branches. As a man, I grilled steaks beneath them, hung lanterns there for my wife's birthday, and hammered a swing for my niece. If a yard can have a pulse, the oak was mine. Melanie Payne did not see a living memory. She saw a blemish on a brochure. I stood between her and the trunk, while her two day labor hires hesitated, chainsaw idling with a mean mosquito snarl. "Kill the engine," I shouted. "Nobody cuts another inch." One of them, cap turned backward, sweat already beading, looked relieved and reached for the choke. The other looked to Melanie, who stood as if auditioning for a corporate training video on how to be overconfident. She lifted her clipboard like a scepter. Bylaw 47.8, she repeated, enunciating each number as if it were scripture. Unsafe vegetation must be removed immediately. This is an emergency action authorized by the HOA presidency. I laughed. Couldn't help it. You can barely authorize a lemonade stand without board approval, I said. There is no bylaw 47 point anything. And even if there were, it wouldn't let you trespass on private property and butcher a healthy tree. Melanie's smile was the kind that never reaches the eyes. Mr. Boyd, the common welfare doesn't trump the law, I cut in. And certainly not my deed. One chainsaw coughed to silence. The other sputtered, indecisive, until its operator, sharing a quick look with me that said, "I don't get paid enough to be arrested today," eased it down too. For a breath, the morning exhaled. Birds, a pair of stubborn doves, returned to the gutter's edge and resumed their bickering as if even they had opinions about Melanie. "Fine," Melanie said, crisp as a paper cut. "If you wish to formalize this, we can formalize. You'll receive a notice of violation this afternoon." She tapped the trunk with her pen, an absurd little poke against a century of oak. Canker, rot, insect blight. See the bark fissures. Classic hazard indicators. "Classic, you misreading what you don't understand," I said. "The arborist's report is on my fridge. Healthy crown sound structure, seasonal shedding within normal limits. But tell you what, let's formalize. Right now." I pulled my phone and began recording. Her jaw twitched. "For documentation," I said, steadying the frame on her HOA badge, which she wore like a sheriff's star at a parade. "Please state your name, title, and the exact bylaw number authorizing the removal of my tree from my private property without my consent." Behind her, the workers found sudden interest in their shoelaces. Melanie tilted her head the way people do when they want to look taller than you. Melanie Payne, president of the Brookstone Meadows Homeowners Association. Under bylaw. She paused, searching in the purse of her memory for the next bluff card. 47.8, subsection B, addressing imminent safety hazards. "Great," I said, feigning gratitude. "And the text of that bylaw is..." "Where exactly?" "In the rules packet," she said, brittle. "Which you seem to chronically ignore." "Right. The same packet that lists maximum mailbox height and acceptable tones of beige. Let's do this the simple way." I opened my email app, hit record on a voice note too. "I'm contacting the board and the police. If you and your crew are still on my property when they arrive, you can explain your beige theology to them." She flared. Melanie did not like being contradicted, not publicly, not in front of people she imagined were her subordinates. She fired a quick look at the workers. "Pack up," she snapped. "We'll return with proper documentation." In HOA speak, proper documentation often means invented later. But it also meant I had a window. I walked them out, no courtesy smile, just the iron of the gate sliding shut between us. Melanie lingered on the sidewalk like a storm that couldn't decide whether to hit. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be," she said. "That line usually precedes a mistake," I replied. "Don't make it." She pivoted on a hard heel and strode off, phone already at her ear. If I had to guess, she was calling the one or two board members who still believed her bark had bite. She would speak quickly, fill the air with confident nonsense, and hang up before anyone asked for a PDF. Inside, my kitchen smelled faintly of last night's coffee and lemon oil. I stood at the fridge and stared at the arborist's report again just to steady myself. Quercus alba healthy, estimated age 102. Replacement value $42 700. I ran a hand over the stack of papers, title, and deed survey lines, fence permits, correspondence with the City Forestry Division. I didn't pick this fight, but if she wanted it official, it would be official. I dialed Thomas. If a voice could wear a tailored suit, my friends did. "Morning, Ethan. I saw your missed call. Everything all right? Define all right," I said, and told him everything from the first scream of the chainsaw to Melanie's fake scripture. He didn't interrupt, just took notes the way he always had, like a stenographer at an autopsy. "Send me the video," he said. And the arborist report. "You did the right thing by recording. 2 points. 1, trespass is trespass. 2, if she continues, we're no longer in HOA slap fight territory, we're in felony property damage. The valuation and the arborist certification are key. Keep your cool, document, and call the police if they set foot there again." "Already on it," I said. "I'll CC the board on everything." "Good. Add a line requesting confirmation of the bylaw. Make them put in writing what doesn't exist." I hung up and drafted the email. Subject line: unauthorized tree removal attempt. Immediate board attention required. I kept the tone civil but cold, bullets pointed, and numbered facts, timestamps, names the fabricated bylaw 47.8 cited verbatim. Attached the video, the report, and snapshots of the trunk, the clean bark, the high canopy, the swing I'd unhooked 10 minutes earlier with hands that were suddenly shaking. By the time I hit send, the neighborhood group text was already pinging with footage. Someone down the block had gotten Melanie's dramatic entrance in sparkling 1080p, her marching across my lawn like patent chainsaw concierge in tow. The comments were a parade of clucking emojis and the sort of neutered outrage people save for minor celebrity scandals. But buried in there were the messages that mattered. "We've had issues with her too. She tried to cite us for a bird feeder. Happy to testify if needed. Seeds planted." At the hardware store later that morning, I bought 4 more cameras and a roll of signage that read with refreshing bluntness, "No trespassing." The clerk, a retiree with forearms like old rope, glanced at my haul. "Problem raccoons?" he asked. "Two-legged," I said. "Ah," he nodded, the ancient village signal for say no more. I spent the afternoon on the ladder, tightening brackets, running cable, aiming lenses so that not even a vindictive squirrel could escape documentation. I angled one camera straight at the oak's trunk half to protect it half in case I ever needed to replay its quiet strength like a benediction. Around 5, the board's reply landed. James Holloway, chairperson, wrote with the weary clarity of a man who'd been copied into too many HOA wars. "There is no bylaw 47.8. The HOA has not authorized any removal or citation against your property. Any notices you receive to the contrary should be forwarded to the board immediately. We will address this." I printed it out because paper feels heavier than pixels. Then I taped it to the inside of my back door where I could read it every time I went outside. The oak backlit in the late sun threw a cathedral of shadows over the grass. It looked unbothered. I envied it. Evening settled. Somewhere a grill flared and somebody cheered at a game. I sat under the oak with a legal pad and made a list: dates, calls, next steps. Melanie believed urgency could be faked. I believed patience could be sharpened. She'd brought a chainsaw to a paper trail. I liked my odds. And still I could feel it, the promise of escalation hanging in the warm air like humidity. Bullies don't retreat, they regroup. She would come back louder, meaner, convinced that repetition turns lies into law. Good. I wanted her to. Cameras were ready. So was I. By the next morning, the oak looked the same, solid, unmoved, a sentinel in the yard, but I didn't. Sleep had been a suggestion, not an achievement. Every creak outside had felt like the return of Melanie Payne with her phantom bylaws and her chainsaw mercenaries. By sunrise, I had brewed enough coffee to fuel a small army and decided it was time to stop reacting and start fortifying. My first call was to the non-emergency line of the Brookstone Police. "I'd like to report an attempted property destruction and trespass," I said. The dispatcher's tone shifted from routine to alert when I mentioned a chainsaw. Within the hour, a patrol car pulled up, red and blue lights, politely quiet. Officer Rodriguez, a broad-shouldered man with a mustache so perfect it looked painted on, stepped out first. Officer Chen, younger, sharp-eyed, followed, notebook ready. They walked the perimeter with me, inspecting where Melanie's hired cutters had nicked into the oak's bark. It wasn't deep, more of a scar than a wound, but the insult was worse than the injury. "You've got her on video?" Rodriguez asked. "Multiple angles," I said, handing over a thumb drive. She even announced the fake bylaw for the camera. Subsection B, apparently of her imagination. Chen smirked, despite herself. "Creative." I explained how Melanie had invoked her self-manufactured authority, how she'd cited non-existent rules, and how she'd promised formal notices. "She's escalating," I added. "And I'm not waiting for her to take the trunk all the way through before something is done." Rodriguez leaned a hand on the oak. "This tree's older than any of us. Looks strong to me. You've got enough documentation here to press charges if she tries again. My advice, keep those cameras rolling. Call us the second you see her set foot past your fence. We'll have it on record." They left with a copy of the footage and promised a patrol swing-by during the week. For the first time in 24 hours, I felt like the law wasn't just a phrase Melanie tossed around. It was something heavier, something that could land on her shoulders if she pushed further. "Next, call Thomas Green, my lawyer and longtime friend." When he answered, his voice carried the calm of a man whose weapon of choice was paperwork. "I've reviewed the board's email you forwarded. That alone dismantles her claim, but we need more." "What kind of more?" "Expert testimony. An arborist. Someone who can quantify what she almost destroyed. If this escalates to court, judges love numbers. Value, age, condition. And we'll need to establish that the oak is not a hazard, that her justification is baseless." "Already ahead of you," I said. "I've got a report on file. Certified arborist. Says the tree's healthy. Replacement value around 40 grand. Thomas whistled low. 40,000 Ethan. If she'd succeeded, that's felony territory. Criminal mischief, property destruction, easily. With video evidence, she'd be boxed in like a raccoon in a dumpster." I pictured Melanie in a courtroom wagging her clipboard at a judge who couldn't care less about her bylaws. The thought warmed me more than the coffee. By midday, the arborist himself, Dr. Leonard Marks, came to re-inspect. He circled the oak with a reverence usually reserved for art. "Quercus alba," he murmured, tracing the grooves of the bark. "White oak. Healthy crown. Strong branching. Minimal pest presence. This tree could stand another century if cared for properly." He crouched, brushing away soil at the base. Some superficial scarring from her attempt, but nothing fatal. "If she'd gone deeper," he shook his head. "Well, you'd be mourning a part of your family history. Tell me about it," I said. "You can give me a statement." "Absolutely," he said, tucking a tape measure back into his kit. "I'll update your report, note the value, and add the risk analysis. If she tries again, there's no wiggle room." I signed his invoice with satisfaction. Every page was another nail in Melanie's coffin of credibility. Sure enough, by late afternoon, a notice appeared in my mailbox. Not from the city, not from the official HOA board, but from Melanie herself. Printed on HOA letterhead, she must have pirated from a template. The letter accused me of endangering community welfare by failing to remove the oak and threatened a daily fine of $250 until compliance. At the bottom, her signature, Melanie Payne, HOA president. I scanned it, laughed, and sent it straight to Thomas and the board. Within an hour, James Holloway, the real chairman, replied to all. "This is not an authorized communication. Please disregard any notices issued by Miss Payne outside official HOA channels." It was the legal equivalent of pulling the rug out from under her, and I almost wished I'd been there to see her face when she realized her little scheme had been exposed in writing. Still, I knew Melanie. She didn't back down, she doubled down. A woman like her believed repetition could make fiction into fact. She would claim, insist, demand until someone too tired to argue simply gave in. But I wasn't tired. I was caffeinated, camera ready, and braced for the next swing. That evening, as the oak stretched shadows across the yard, I sat beneath it with my laptop and drafted a personal log. Time-stamped entries, scanned letters, copied emails, screenshots of texts from neighbors who had filmed her trespass. I imagined one day laying it all out on a courtroom projector, the saga of a tree versus a tyrant. Halfway through typing, my phone buzzed with a message from Thomas. "Remember, Ethan, HOA power is not absolute. They can fine for paint colors and lawn length, not chainsaw diplomacy." She crossed the property line. That's where HOA ends, and the law begins. I leaned back, staring up through the lattice of branches, the leaves whispering like gossip overhead. Maybe Melanie thought she was running this neighborhood, but she'd just been handed a lesson the law didn't wear a clipboard. It wore a badge, carried a gavel, and held receipts in neat manila folders. And I had plenty of those. If you've never received an HOA violation notice before, let me describe the sensation. It's like finding a parking ticket on your windshield when you know darn well you fed the meter. It's not fear so much as irritation, a paper mosquito bite that makes you itch in places you didn't know could itch. 2 days after the chainsaw incident, I opened my mailbox and found a neat little envelope with the HOA logo in the corner. Inside, a notice of violation addressed to me citing, you guessed it, Bylaw 47.8, unsafe vegetation hazard. According to the document, my oak tree represented an imminent threat to the safety of Brookstone Meadows. The letter demanded that I remove it within 7 days or incur a $250 daily fine until compliance was achieved. I laughed so hard the mailman probably thought I'd lost my mind. The oak was standing tall in my yard, birds fluttering in its branches, squirrels chasing each other in manic spirals, and here was Melanie Payne trying to convince the world it was a ticking time bomb. The kicker was the signature line. Melanie Payne, HOA president. She'd even stamped it with a knockoff seal. If I didn't know better, I'd have thought she raided the arts and crafts aisle at Office Depot. I marched back inside, scanned the document, and sent it to the HOA board with the subject line, Creative Writing Assignment Turned in Late. Within minutes, I got a reply from James Holloway, the real HOA chairman. Mr. Boyd, this is not an authorized communication. The board has not issued any such violation, and there is no bylaw 47.8. Please disregard Miss Payne's notice. Forward any further correspondence of this nature to us immediately. James Holloway,